With the Bush administration, it was blatant and obvious, and we could all see it. It was on the surface. There was no question.
With Dick Cheney being former,
with
board
Dick
member
Cheney
of
being,
Halliburton, and his wife
exactly,
still on the board of
exactly,
and the rest of it.
And that having to do with 9/11, coming. And I think if you just look at the balance sheet of Halliburton before and after 9/11, it says pretty much everything that needs to be said. But what has come to pass is exactly that those people firmly have control of this country. And at the moment of 9/11, and I was watching the buildings drop, I'm looking at it and I could see that it was a controlled demolition. But it really didn't actually register that that was what it was until a year later when I was confronted with evidence from engineers and architects that was in fact the case, that was blatantly. It had all 15 characteristics of a controlled demolition. And it's not that I was duped or I bought into anything, because I was immediately suspicious, and the fact that it was an inside job came pretty easy, but just the reality that that's what it was, it hit me with a shock and that it was a year and a half later that it actually happened. And after I bought into that, I realized what my purpose as a journalist was, and as a political activist.
What I think is absolutely outrageous and should be noted by everybody that learns about these kind of things, false flag events and terror upon citizens, like we mentioned, Operation Gladio. There's the Operation Northwoods, which was a paper that proposed simulating terrorist attacks on Americans and our freight lines and other things like that. I mean, there's so many examples, blatantly clear of this. I mean, how bold and arrogant do these people become, when they're robbing elections, right in front of the eyes of the American people, and they put up patsies so they can, give it to their chosen leaders. And I mean, it's quite frightening. I mean, you wonder, where they're going to ever stop. And what's going to take for people to wake up and to prevent this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, for me, what it takes is it has to do with the awareness of that 9/11 was, in fact, a contrived event.
It's a pivotal thing.
It's a pivotal thing, and, we've seen it again recently with them trying to create that mentality. There was recently, they put a Nigerian man on board a plane and created an incident where they said, this guy, terrorist, be afraid, there you go. And it was just another, to me, it was another contrived event where they said we have to keep the fear alive. And if we don't, people start questioning things.
Oh yeah, and the reports have come out about that he just bypassed security and didn't even get put through.
Was escorted on a plane.
In a suit and all the
rest. It was
rest.
allegedly some sort of a government agent.
It's pretty much confirmed now that that's what happened. Everyone had the hint of it, at least if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Exactly, which, is a very focal point of how these things are manifesting is having to do with getting on and off planes, as you know, in your personal experiences. And as far as my personal experiences is, I'm not willing to get on a plane at this moment in time because, people
to go through the full body scanners and get your naked body scanned, get radiation pumped through your skin.
Not to mention the fact that they just run your name through a computer database. And, gee, I don't know how my name lies in the computer database.
Not to what extent of harassment you have to endure to breach the perimeter and get into a place that you should be able to travel without being accosted and probed.
And I had no expectations of being able to travel without being accosted and probed. So my solution is just to simply not get on a plane.
Yeah, exactly.
And the main issue, of course, is it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Of course, it is.
Your inalienable rights, you're giving them up. Just so you can fly somewhere for the convenience of that.
And giving up your inalienable rights, that's what 9/11 was about for me. And I think the really key issue that historians will look at in the big picture is how the fact that the Patriot Act, which undermines our civil liberties in about 75 different ways, that all was in place before 9/11. They all had that thought out. It was right there. And
it had already been tried to be passed since H.W. and all through Clinton's time.
Exactly.
And the Congress would never pass it.
Except it was outrageous.
Something like this happened.
Exactly. The presumptions behind it, the whole assumptions and the philosophical mindset behind the Patriot Act was so offensive, until 9/11 happened, and then it was, ooh, self-evident, I guess.
And of course, the main issue with it is that they are trying to sacrifice our liberties for security. And our founding fathers even said that that was an incorrect thing to do.
Yeah, and then you get or deserve neither.
Exactly. What's happening now with the changes in our country that our military-industrial complex leadership is bringing about has everything to do with violating the intent of our founding fathers.
Mm-hmm. And as Jefferson said about information being currency of democracy, it's counterintuitive for these people that have control over those conglomerate structures, which include our media, our medical industries, and our political systems and economic systems and monetary systems. I mean, they have no interest in giving us what reality is. And I mean, why would anybody that's ripping you off have any inclination to share with you that they're screwing you over at that very moment? I mean, it's utterly ridiculous to entertain that possibility that it's going to be that apparent that they're going to just come out and tell you. People have to do their homework, and they have to really try and get their head out of the sand. I mean, you might have to claw a little bit. And
yeah, well, that's the beauty of the internet. You know, you're right. You do have to do your homework, you know, and that's what really hit me with 9/11 is you could go to WTC7.net, watch the dropping of Building 7, and immediately become into the mindset of challenging everything our government has to say about.
Which BBC reported collapsed, 20 minutes or so before it did, which you actually had in...
Which is actually on the cover of the 50th issue of the Steelhead Special, is the fact that the BBC reported minutes before Building 7 actually collapsed that it had collapsed.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar...
So why is it important for people to seek out alternative news, independent news media such as yours, your magazine such as our show, other kinds of news that are out there in the country, around the world? Why is it important for people to look at that instead of the mainstream news media?
Well, you know, the mainstream media is in our face. And you say instead of, but really when you think about it, since there's almost no avoiding it, it's in addition to. You know, and to just pay attention to mainstream media, you're limiting yourself. And you're potentially being led, more important, and you're being led by fear. And I think that the thing to pay attention to in the mainstream media more than anything else is when fear is being used, you need to look at the agenda behind that fear, is what it is. And the alternative news sources such as your show, my magazine, and a whole variety of things that are there, and they're on the internet.
Yeah, like blogs.
Like blogs, like sites, WTC.
And the interesting thing about the alternative media, as you've noticed with this show, your magazine as well, there's articles there from the mainstream media.
Yeah,
the mainstream media often reports on a lot of these things, but they're
suppressed.
underreported. They're not, the headlines, they're not put out largely, and they aren't put out in a way to make you significantly think about it. And so what needs to be done by people like us and others is basically a compilation of news from all over the world, from all these different papers, and then you can fit it into kind of a scheme and you can see how it's all working together around the planet.
You know, the interesting thing about using the mainstream media to make the case for what you're having to say here is that there are little clues in all of mainstream media, and where the case for that was made was in Loose Change, I think, where they found little pieces that were reported that day, that very day. You know, Dan Rather saying it looks just like a controlled demolition, I think, was really the key event, and him saying that was more significant than we can ever possibly imagine.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
You know, if you just look at the many, many hundreds of millions of people who bought into the idea that 9/11 was something other than a controlled demolition.
The thing is that the image of it, of what we saw and how it transpired, is just so horrifying that thousands of people were in an instant murdered like that, en masse, by demolition of a building. Did they want us to believe that some guys in a cave got our NORAD to stand down, our air defenses, for, you know, what, like 2 hours, so these planes could fly around like in an unprecedented fashion, standard operating procedures that they're supposed to do something. I mean, it's like, how obvious does it have to become? But I mean, some people just don't, I think, want to acknowledge it or do the work. You know, maybe they're so just mentally atrophied by being spoon-fed just this basic reality where people's sexual exploits and sports, you know, receive more recognition than who's holding power over people in the world, and injustice and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, you know, that's what it is. It's wanting to not look at it. You know, I mean, it all comes back to Plato's analogy of the cave, where you don't want to look.
Yes.
You know, you want to look at the shadows. You don't want to look at this. You know, the actual light.
And then what happens when someone tells?
And the person who comes in and says, "Hey, I found light outside of this cave. No, this place is way bigger than you guys think." They start punching him and kicking at him and saying, "Get out of here! You know, you're bringing the light in here. I'm trying to stay in the dark."
Yeah, I'm trying to stay happy and
people
satisfied.
often will fight you to not learn about information that's critical to their own lives and their own children's and whole families.
And they'll even become aggressive about it.
In fact, one of the most revealing moments of my life is trying to tell a friend of mine that I've been having an ongoing debate with for 20 years, and was basically a Republican, that this is what it is. I've looked at it. 9/11 was an inside job. That's how I feel. There's extensive evidence to it, and there's no evidence to the contrary. And she said, I don't want to believe it. It contradicts to everything that I believed my whole life, everything I was raised with, and everything that led me to vote for Ronald Reagan in 1980. You know, and I just I can't go there. It would undermine my personal serenity too much.
That's called cognitive dissonance.
It's
basically.
cognitive dissonance, and you know, she could justify it because what do I really want? I want to be not upset. I want to be happy.
Yep.
I don't want to have my feelings hurt by the fact that I voted for George W. Bush. You know, and I tried to be compassionate for her and what she wanted. You know, but the reality of the situation is that these things are going down. You know, we're being subjected to this. And we can either be bullied, or we can stand up for ourselves the best we can with, at this point, all we can do is participate in alternative media sources like your guys' show, like my magazine, like dozens of other projects on the net and that are available to us.
Well, thank you for coming on our show, Joe, and I hope people check out the Steelhead. Where can people pick up the Steelhead around town?
The Steelhead is wherever free magazines are distributed,
All right.
wherever you can find any of those other ones.
Yeah.
You can find that one. We should have an issue coming out, I believe, in very early March.
Okay, and is there a website, anything people can visit?
Steelheadspecial.com. It's a PDF download. Enjoy.
Alrighty.